Welcome to Health Systems CIO's Partner Perspective interview series. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Today we're talking with Chartis Group's Craig Schlusberg and Greg Benton about the state of ERP implementations in healthcare. Craig is a principal with the organization, and Greg is director and ERP national practice leader. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks,
for
Anthony.
having us here.
Yeah. All right, let's start off. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your organization and your roles there?
Sure, I'll start off. I'm Craig. Anthony, the Chartis Group is a consulting firm with over 500 professionals dedicated to improving the delivery of healthcare in the world. Healthcare is our sole focus, and we work with our clients on their clinical and operational strategies, helping them to improve their performance and helping to ensure that they get the most value out of their IT investments. Like you mentioned, Greg and I are both partners. We're partners in our business informatics and technology practice, of which ERP is a major part. For my part, I've been in healthcare consulting and in IT specifically for over 25 years. Greg?
And Greg, I've been in healthcare IT and ERP for over 20 years, pioneered some of the early adopter cloud and ERP solutions, and helped with implementations for over 50 healthcare organizations over the last 20 years.
All right, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And co-lead the ERP practice with Craig.
All right, very good. So you're both obviously very involved with ERP implementations, and I believe they are on the rise. So can you tell me why they're on the rise?
Yeah, well, for one, the ERP landscape is really evolving. I mean, what we've seen is after years of focusing on EHRs and clinical systems, healthcare organizations largely have those systems in place, and we're seeing a big shift now over to ERP and the cost savings and operational improvement and data integration that organizations can expect now out of these new cloud-based ERP systems. M&A, the uptick in M&A activity has also been a major driver as organizations are forced to, in some cases, replace or integrate their ERP systems with others. But this year, especially, the pandemic's been a major driver. This patchwork of disparate HR and supply chain and finance systems has really prevented healthcare leaders from having the access to real-time data that they really should have had for decision-making through the pandemic. And from things like supply chain systems that really struggle to locate reputable sources of PPE to HR systems that were challenged to keep up with the demands of the newly remote workforce. It's like the pandemic's broken down years worth of barriers to replacing and optimizing these ERP systems.
And Anthony, the ERP systems have dramatically changed over the last 3 to 5 years. They're smarter, faster, leaner, and can keep pace with business change. But importantly, the multi-tenant cloud environment that has been developing, taking the place of single-tenant and on-premise solutions for ERP, has really revolutionized the way that ERP is deployed, and really facilitates healthcare operations in terms of the business operations within a healthcare organization. So you're now able to achieve really strategic gains in ROI and strategy with the new ERP systems, whereas before it was really more focused on EHR and getting the clinical systems in place.
Yeah.
So, Craig, you mentioned PPE, and we know that was a huge thing. So you're saying you can see a direct tie between health systems trying to move on things like that and the fact that if they had a patchwork ERP environment, they were inhibited from being successful there. Can you tell me more about that, Craig?
Yeah, just the integration between those systems. So and really the agility and ability to change quickly, with those systems. So when you've got disparate systems and you've got supply chain systems with a lot of manual process without, new AI type of tools and RPA, robotic, process automation type of tools, and really old type of standard systems, you're limited to just the contract management capabilities of your old system. There aren't tie-ins with the finance system. There aren't tie-ins with your clinical systems. from a need standpoint, and it just makes it more difficult to get real-time information out and to be able to change quickly to adapt to what the market needs. In that case, it's being able to have access to additional suppliers of materials to be able to quickly change when current suppliers aren't able to supply the organization with what it needs.
Right, right. So Greg, it's a sort of a combination of things coming together. Number one, they were sort of done with the EMR stuff, right? So you had some capacity perhaps opening up there. You had the pandemic coming in, highlighting the deficiencies of their current environment, and then you had an environment where the systems available out there, now that they're in the cloud, gave you an improved environment. So would you say, is it kind of those three and perhaps other things coming together to make ERP a natural pivot point for health systems? Say, okay, this makes sense. We need to go here now.
It is absolutely the pandemic shone a bright spotlight on what needs to happen with the visibility across the entire organization. So as Craig was saying, the ability for these formerly siloed business operations to be able to speak to each other and be able to pass information back and forth so that financial officers, for instance, can get real-time data about what's going on with the organization, from budget to actual expenditures, from having to locate PPE gear and get it in the right place at the right time. All of that is facilitated by the new technology and really the next generation ERP systems and platforms on which they reside. So the multi-tenant cloud has made it so that there's a great deal of portability in terms of the database and the ability to manage everything remotely. But that has really facilitated a rapid change in the deployment of supply chain systems and solutions.
So, Craig, are there really, and we'll probably get into this more in a little bit, but I'm thinking there's a very different set of internal customers that you're dealing with if you're a CIO and you're rolling out ERP, right? So EHR has always been doctors and nurses. I mean, you're dealing with the clinicians and they're their own challenge. There's their own methodology for dealing with them. There's probably some similarities no matter who you're rolling out a system to in terms of getting buy-in and things like that.
Right.
But with ERP, you're dealing more, I would imagine, with the business, internal employees, the business people, as opposed to the clinicians.
Right.
Big difference there, right?
Big difference. So first, you're dealing with operational leadership, and that's a big opportunity for the CIO to really help the organization come together, and move forward with these kinds of decisions. You've got, in many cases, supply chain and materials management leaders who have had their own system for years and who have, who feel strongly about a particular vendor system and feel strongly about, potential future vendor systems. You've got chief human resources officers who might feel very differently about the system that they're using and the systems that they'd like to move to, and other departmental leaders as well. So that's in itself a challenge, but it's an opportunity area for CIOs who can help organizations to understand what these new integrated systems have to offer, to help build consensus around the platform for change, to help the organization realize that really it's the sum of its parts, and to generate, to really engage the key stakeholders and generate that interest and willingness to move ahead with integrated systems, recognizing that it makes sense for the organization as a whole.
Greg, let's talk a little bit about, so if they're pivoting, if they have capacity, you could go anywhere, right? You can do anything with capacity. You don't necessarily need to do ERP, but we talked about some reasons they might be doing it. We talk a lot about governance in terms of an organization deciding where they're going to spend their money. And we talk a lot about the CIO being a leader as opposed to a follower. And that's always a mix there. They follow the CEO, but they need to lead and bring ideas and things like that. They don't want to just do what they're told, so to speak, and be order takers. You got a lot of things going on here. What is the CIO's role right now in promoting ERP and working within the governance structure of a health system. What are they supposed to do?
I think the CIO needs to point out that the change to the transformation to a new ERP system is not a decision for new ERP. It's not a technology decision, it's a people, process, and technology decision. There is a ton of return on investment available through employing the latest and greatest systems in the cloud. So moving to multi-tenancy and a cloud solution comes with a lower bottom line cost. In other words, the cost of operations can be decreased. The ability to pivot, as you said, to be able to operate anywhere and be able to turn on a dime in order to account for crises, for the next thing that comes around the corner to impact the hospital. And that lower cost of operations, ability to move very quickly and respond to anything that comes the healthcare system's way, and conveying that to the CFO as an investment that makes sense in really a business case for the organization is what CIOs are really trying to do right now in terms of making that transformational change throughout the organization.
So, Greg said that there's a ton of ROI here, but that doesn't mean this is easy. This is a project you have to be ready for and have to believe in, and because it's not going to be easy, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of political capital. It's going to take a lot of your budget. It's going to take a lot of your team's manpower. You're going to hit a lot of snags. You're going to have to power through those. So it's almost like you got to gear up. You got to be ready. Is that how you describe it?
You got to gear up and you got to be ready. Yeah. And we see, and that's the case whether you're, upgrading existing systems or migrating to new systems. Moving to cloud systems isn't really an upgrade. These are entirely new processes, entirely new systems. It's a migration, if anything, and at best, and probably more like a new implementation. But in terms of gearing up, we see a lot of organizations jump right into a system selection process, and really, the challenge there is that they haven't taken the time to understand what it is they're looking to accomplish. So, we recommend starting with the end in mind, starting with developing that strategy around what it is the organization is trying to accomplish with the new ERP system. Where are the savings going to be? What are the changes going to look like? Where are we looking to get to as an organization? And then I'm just getting an understanding of where things are today. What do you do well today? What works well in today's environment? What's really going to have to change moving forward? So understanding where you want to go, understanding how you're doing things today and what you can build on, and then launching a thoughtful selection process to determine what system vendors and implementation partners can best help you get there. And even that, with the selection process itself, we're seeing a real change from that history of selecting vendors to a much more accelerated process today. We're no longer focused on that exhaustive list of system functionality. There's just too much that these new cloud ERP systems can do. That what we recommend to our clients is focusing on what are the priority areas? What functionalities are most important? What functionalities are most unique to your particular organization? In terms of looking at the next system and what it can support. Understanding what ERP systems work well in the market. What's been their history? Where have they had successes? Where haven't they had successes, and why? And then putting together that whole total cost of ownership model so that the organization really understands what it is they're getting into from an investment standpoint. Not just the cost of the software, but the cost of the entire implementation, what it's going to take over time to really do it right. So all of that before launching into the implementation is the way to do it right and to maximize the chance for success.
Greg, give me a little more on, again, the CIO's role in this. Craig talked about understanding what the organization wants to do. Well, how does the CIO find out what the organization wants to do as it relates to ERP? I mean, are they supposed to wait until the ERP folks, quote unquote, come to them and say, hey, we've heard about this cloud stuff, or we'd like to be able to do more things. How can technology help us? Or does the CIO proactively go to business folks and say, hey, there's this cool ERP systems out there. You might want to think about it. What's the natural way a CIO should behave, or what's the best way to make, if they believe that this is the right thing for the organization?
Anthony, over the next 5 years, everyone in every healthcare organization is going to be facing a transformative change. They're going to be looking at new systems that are available to them. They're going to be looking at how can I compete in the marketplace. They're going to be looking to the CIO to make that technology decision. The CIO has to your point, proactively get out in front of these decisions that are going to be made and really pull in the entire organization. So the decision should not be an IT decision. It really needs to be an IT and the business leaders' decision that they're going to move forward with a new system, or they're going to optimize the system that they currently have. And that brings in the budgetary considerations, so that you can't just go out there and say, we're going to adopt this new technology. We've got no budget, but we'll get there. So you need to bring in the CFO. You need to bring in certainly the business leaders from each of the departments and the areas in the organization. They're going to have feedback that provide kind of a directional for the organization. And then, as Craig was saying, you need to go through a process of getting everyone on board with putting together the business case or putting together the strategy for the organization, establishing real goals for what the end game looks like in terms of your transformed operations, and then pulling everybody together to make sound decisions about different ERP systems that are available to them.
So Craig, it's a don't tell me what, and we heard this before, don't tell me what tools you need. Don't tell me what bells and whistles you think you need. Tell me what you're trying to do from a business point of view. Let me go see what we have. We might already have it. Let me see what's out there that might do what you're trying to do. But let me figure out that technology match. Don't come to me with the technology piece, because that's my job to make sure we're getting the right piece of technology. Is that a good way to look at it?
Well, I think it's important for those leaders in the organization to understand what's out there and what's available to them. So, don't come to me with the technology. Let's jointly talk about what the needs are.
Right.
And I think the CIO can also help to demonstrate what the systems can do. So department leaders might not be aware of what the latest and greatest functionalities are in the tools. They might not be aware of what they can do, how much is available online. For in the HR example, how much employee self-service you can do. There have been such great advances with the integration of financial with clinical systems that those leaders might not be aware of. So yeah, the premise is solid. Come to me with where you want to go. Let me as a CIO help explain what's out there in the market that can meet that need. And let's jointly work together to get something great in place.
So we've talked about that they have to understand. They have to understand what the tools are. We talked a little bit about why they need to take another look at ERP now, or what the new capabilities are. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of that, Greg, in terms of what you want CIOs to know who may not have taken much of a look at ERP? Anything additionally you want them to know about what's going on and what's available?
I certainly would offer, Anthony, that if you looked at ERP systems even 3 years ago, and you looked at the single-tenant or on-premise type of a solution that was provided by all of the top ERP vendors, you haven't really looked at the systems and the solutions that are available today. You need to take a closer look at the way that they interoperate, the way that interoperability between the EHR systems and the ERP systems have been flexed and accommodated by the newer technology and the systems that operate your operations, your healthcare operations. So ERP has really evolved very quickly, especially accelerated by the pandemic, to healthcare operations platforms rather than your grandfather's ERP system. So,
Craig, large health systems only, or how far down does this scale? in terms of cloud migration, all
You
that
know,
type of thing?
it's a great question. I think, sometimes we hear about these fantastic, multi-tenant cloud environments, and it seems like that they're just being set up for large organizations. But no, small and mid-sized organizations can absolutely benefit from the technology as well and from the processes. Sometimes smaller organizations can benefit more. They're used to managing their own ERP systems in their data center. Like Greg mentioned, the move from single tenant, on-prem systems to multi-tenant cloud. There didn't used to be an option for smaller organizations. You needed to manage your systems. Now, with the move to cloud, smaller organizations can really finally get rid of that data center. And since they've already largely moved EHR operations to the cloud, now is an opportunity to move ERP operations to the cloud as well. So certainly an opportunity for small and mid-sized organizations. From a process change standpoint, they might have a little bit more difficult of a time. We haven't talked yet too much about change management and its importance, but for smaller and mid-sized organizations, being able to take on the amount of change required in the new cloud-based ERP systems could be a challenge. You've got to make sure that they're adequately ramped up for that. But certainly from a system standpoint, they support from small to large.
So, Greg, we talked a little bit about not starting off and picking a vendor right away. You have to understand what you're trying to do. You don't want to put the cart before the horse, so to speak. So there's the element of selecting the vendor. There's the element of, once that done, there's the implementation, which would include the change management that Craig talked about, and then making sure the system is optimized or used or fully embraced. You want to take those one at a time, the vendor selection, implementation, and then optimization, and just give me your thoughts around, what
Yeah,
CIOs need to know.
the point of the discussion is where should I start, and where do I want to end up? So before you ever get started with the selection process, you really should take a look at starting with a very deep strategy guide internally within your organization. In other words, understand where you want to go, put some metrics around what the transformed operations system is going to look like and how it will perform, and work backwards from there so that you're very clear internally with everyone on board about where the system selection is going to go, and really kind of a phase zero, looking at your current topology, looking at the current systems that you run, the need for interoperability between EHR and ERP, and then going into a selection process where you really look at everything that's available out there and narrow it down very quickly. As Craig was saying, we've seen that the selection process has been narrowed down to really those operational improvements that you can get out of the system rather than the table stakes, just the ongoing operations that are included in ERP. And then go into a very accelerated selection process. Choosing the implementation partner is equally as important as choosing the right software vendor. And that should be done really in concert with deciding how you're going to go forward as part of the planning phase. And then getting into the full implementation, it's very helpful to have implementation governed by an internal and external PMO. So basically program management to ensure that you go all the way through the implementation. Change management is a very disciplined part of that, making sure that the entire organization moves forward with the changes that you're implementing with the new ERP system, and then support and ongoing operations beyond that.
I would just add, Anthony, Greg mentioned change management. We've talked about it a couple times. I think the real importance of change management in this implementation process, especially from an ERP standpoint, what we see with organizations that don't focus on change, first off, is that they've spent all this money and time to implement brand new systems. And shortly after they're implemented, people start reverting to old processes or inventing workarounds to get back to the way they're used to doing things. And often that's because they just don't have a great understanding of how the new system is supposed to work. So we see organizations be most successful when they focus the time on communication and change management and ensuring that operational owners and all of the users understand and are ready for the change. And that includes understanding what's changing, why it's changing, how it's going to impact everybody's daily, their daily work, and having the time to learn about that, incorporate it, practice it, so that when you actually go live, I don't want to say it's a non-event, but everybody's really ready for the system. They're excited about the system. Sure, there's some trepidatiousness there and concern, but they're able to use the system to understand what's changing and why. And that really sets the path for being able to use the functionality that's delivered initially, as well as optimization down the road, and being able to take on new pieces and new parts and tools.
Craig, do you have any thoughts around change management? There's training involved there, right? We got to train these people on the new system. That's part of change management. So when we say, okay, it's time to use it, they have some clue how, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What are your thoughts on mandatory versus, hey, we put a bunch of stuff out there. Nobody looked at it. It's not our fault. I mean, but that doesn't work. If you're the CIO or you're the head of IT and you put a bunch of stuff out there and nobody looked at it, and then there's a disaster on day one with the help desk because no one knows how to use it. It's not really good enough to say, well, we put a lot of stuff out there and nobody looked at it, right? So what are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, well, mandatory is always a tough word, but I think, yes, it's critical that everybody understands, how to use the new system. It's interesting though, because, gone are the days when we would, send people to training for a day and then turn the system on and, and they'd figure it out. There's so much more advanced work now, with the communication and change management, communicating to, end users, again, about what's changing, what to expect, ensuring that they've got the right training tools to go through. And that's a mix of, online training, classroom-based training. There's not quite as much focus on classroom-based training as there used to be, because there are such great online tools available. And also just the proliferation of web-based, or I should say mobile-based functionality that in many cases is self-explanatory, right? You never went through training on how to use your new iPhone or your Android phone. We figured it out as we needed to. The new systems have a lot of that built in. There's a lot of usage that just is self-explanatory based on the new graphical interfaces and how they're designed. But none of that takes the place of required training, so that you're prepared to be able to do your job, and so that you don't have financial and, of course, more importantly, clinical impacts.
So you didn't like my word mandatory, but you like required.
Well, it's yes. No. It's just that organizations struggle when they refuse to deliver a new sign-on to somebody who hasn't gone through the mandatory training. I think organizations have to make sure that the training is there, not just that it's out there, not just that it's encouraged. They've got to get people signed up. They've got to track their progress through training. They do have to make sure that they've completed those courses. So yeah, I'll go so far as to say that both mandatory and required training are necessary.
Greg, we know that there were places when EHRs were rolled out that required training on the EHR by a certain date, or you were not going to be able to put in orders or whatever. Do you not see that as being the move with ERP?
Oh, it definitely is a part of it. As you go through the implementation process, there's a lot of training involved with the implementation teams. So, you go through conference room pilot and actually get your hands on the software system that you're implementing, and do this knowledge transfer and side-by-side training of the teams that are implementing the software, and then transferring that into formal training that goes on all the way through the end users adopting the system as a change management, kind of embedded with training all the way through the go live process. What we've seen, to Craig's point, is if you don't continue that change management and training regimen beyond the go live event, when the implementation team rolls off and some of those people are going back to their day jobs, then you don't have the resources necessary to continue the training and the adoption that's necessary. So that does have to formally be put in place, and put in place as really a learning management system on an ongoing basis.
All right, gentlemen, we're running short on time. I'd like to give you each an opportunity for final thought, takeaway piece of advice, anything we didn't touch on that you want to cover. Craig, why don't you go first?
Sure, thanks. Like Greg mentioned, we covered a lot of ground here about the steps that organizations need to take, and he mentioned that in the 3 to 5 year time horizon, this might not even be a choice anymore. We're seeing existing ERP systems becoming, they're being sunsetted. There are vendors that are no longer supporting those systems. So not only is all this great functionality there, but at this point, it's not really even a case of a question of if, but when organizations are going to be making this move to cloud-based ERP systems, and really, getting ahead of their competition, taking action now, and preparing themselves for, what's going to come next.
Very good, Greg.
Anthony, beginning with the end in mind is really meant to visualize and importantly measure the end state transformed operations that you're looking to achieve when fully realized, and work backwards to map out the game plan and getting there. Given the significant advancements that we see in next generation cloud-based ERP, the opportunity for operational and strategic gain is tremendous right now. So I just encourage everyone to get out and really take a look at the systems that they're operating on currently and see if next generation ERP is exactly what you are looking for your organization to transform into the next decade.
All right, gentlemen, that was wonderful. I want to thank you both very much for your time. I think this will be really valuable to our listeners, so I appreciate it.
Great. Thank
Thanks
you
very much.